Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu Lamplight City. Wir sind zurück. Ja, wir hatten eine Anlaufstelle, wo wir hin wollten, nämlich zur Taxigarage.
Remember, a black eye is not a badge of honor. Anyone picking a fight will be dismissed immediately. Well, that's hardly any fun, is it?
Good evening.
Oh, it's you again. Small world.
Indeed. Mr. Shaw, was it?
That's right. So, what brings you around to the cab depot?
I wanted to ask you some questions if you can spare some time.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Ja, wenigstens hört dann dieses nervige Klopfe auf. Mann.
Did you know Reggie Willingham?
Reggie? Sure, I knew him. Well, just as rather I didn't.
Oh? Why do you say that?
The man was a bore, a scoundrel, a no-good bounder.
I wish he would tell us how he really felt.
Only reason they kept him on here was because he was a good driver.
So it's fair to say you didn't like him?
Nobody did. When I heard he'd been killed, wasn't exactly a surprise. If I treated people the way he did, I'd surely have a lot of enemies.
Okay.
Could you elaborate a bit on Mr. Willingham's behavior?
Oh, he was a proud one. Thought he was God's gift to mankind. Always strutting around, bragging about how many gratuities he'd earned or how many fist fights he'd won against drivers from Phillips. He had the shortest fuse I've ever seen, too. Just looking at him the wrong way could set him off. I'd always laugh to myself when he'd brag about how many women he'd had in a week.
Why is that?
Because it was obvious he had to pay for the pleasure. A man like that isn't going to get a woman otherwise. I may not be a hit with the ladies, but even I know that being a bastard is a surefire way to drive 'em off.
Are you familiar with the so-called Justice Killer?
I've heard a few rumors here and there about some murders in the chum, but I haven't paid 'em much attention. There's plenty for me to worry about in my own life.
Aren't you concerned for your safety?
Not really. Well, I haven't done anything wrong. So if this loony's going around doing justice, it's nothing for me to worry about.
He makes a good point. I think we need to get a better idea of what exactly these victims did to incur the wrath of our killer.
What can you tell me about Colson Cabs?
Not a bad place, really. Only problem is the number of people always coming here for work. Lots of folks think driving a cab is an easy job that anyone can do, but that's not the case. You need to know this city like the back of your hand, and it helps to know how to drive. So we get lots of fellas starting here who don't have the slightest clue what they're doing. They don't last long.
What about the automated cabs? Are those a problem for you?
I prefer not to think about those. Colson has said he's got no plans to replace his fleet, so it's all that matters to me.
Are you still living in Pumblechook Place?
I am, sir. Things are more or less the same, except Roger's not around anymore. Suppose he must have moved on. Hope he isn't planning on coming back, because his paintings made for great kindling.
Oh, I have a feeling he won't be. I appreciate your time, sir.
Pleasure's all mine.
Zurück zum nervigen Klopfen des Mechanikers.
I thought about a career as a mechanic once. Glad I chose police work. Way less messy.
Mehr haben wir hier,
I
ne?
thought about a career as a mechanic.
Wir sind durch das Taxi gelaufen. Okay. Zentrales Lampenlager. Brückenbaustelle. Torbaum. Das Parlament. Wir sind natürlich das Apartment. Gehen wir mal zur Witwe. Hübsches Feuerchen.
What? Who are you?
I'm Miles Fordham, private investigator. Your butler just announced me.
Oh, of course. Forgive me. I was just, well, never mind. Please make yourself comfortable, Mr. Fordham.
Thank you, Mrs. McDonough.
Just a painting of some boring old aristocrat. Surely this one was called Lady Felicity Euphemia Beaversnatch the Simple. They look expensive, but I bet they're totally worthless. I feel sorry for the sucker who has to clean them. Lord Alfred Edward Shufflebottom the Wise comes to mind when looking at this one. This one looks like a Lady Camilla Prudence Wigglewaddle the Grey. I think I'll call this one Lord Edmund Henry Lickspittle the Elder.
Alles klar.
They look expensive, but I bet they're...
Okay, dann können wir hier noch was angucken. Das Gemälde? Nee, da. Das ist aber ein Bug hier, dass ich hier irgendwas angucken kann. Naja.
I appreciate you seeing me, Mrs. McDonough. I know you must be going through a difficult time right now.
What exactly is it you want from me, Mr. Fordham? I already spoke to the police about my husband's murder.
I just have a few questions of my own.
Oh, very well.
What can you tell me about your husband?
I'll tell you the same thing I told the police, Mr. Fordham. Percival was one of the hardest working members of Parliament. He took his job extremely seriously. The recent election caused him a terrible amount of consternation, as I'm sure it did most people. He took Atwood's loss rather hard.
Did you see much of him?
I beg your pardon?
Surely someone with such an important position in government could find themselves consumed by their work. Did he spend much time at home?
He made it a point to come home and have dinner with me every night, even if he had to return to the office afterwards.
And did that happen often?
At least 3 or 4 times in a week, yes. He'd stay in his office working late into the night. As I said, he was very dedicated to his role.
Sounds to me like she's quite dedicated to hers, too.
Did your husband have any enemies?
He was a politician, Mr. Fordham. Half the city hated him.
Did he ever receive any kind of threats against his life?
None that I was ever made aware of. I have no idea who could have killed him, let alone who could have gotten into his office to do it. He hadn't told me about any meetings or appointments this week either.
Was it his custom to inform you of his work affairs?
Oh, well, I've always taken an interest in my husband's work. He'd often mention initiatives he was working on or people he was meeting, that sort of thing. Nothing sensitive or confidential, you understand. Just conversation about his day.
Can you think of any reason why your husband would have been murdered?
Not really. He was a vocal opponent of the construction of the Gascogne-Chumley Bridge, but I hardly think that would have been sufficient reason to drive someone to murder.
Why is that?
Well, it's just a bridge, isn't it? There are plenty of other ways to get to Chumley.
I meant, why was he opposed to it?
Oh, because the amount of money required to build it is exorbitant. Public funds should be used on roads and buildings that are falling apart. What's the point of having something shiny and new if everything around it is in disrepair?
How are you feeling, Mrs. McDonough?
My husband of 42 years was shot in his office. How do you think I feel?
Tactful as always, Fordham. How do you do it?
My apologies. Perhaps that wasn't the most appropriate question. Is there anything I can do to help?
You can start by finding the monster who murdered Percival.
Das kriege ich hin.
Have you heard of the Justice Killer?
That was the name the police mentioned when they told me about Percival's murder. It's absolutely terrifying to think that one sick person could be capable of such evil. Why is he called the Justice Killer? What justice was done by murdering my husband?
I'm afraid I can't answer that right now, Mrs. McDonough, but I intend to find out. Those are all the questions I have for now, Mrs. McDonough.
All right, Mr. Fordham.
Okeli-dokeli, das hat uns, naja, nicht so viel mit weitergebracht. Wir wissen nur, dass ihr Mann oft noch mal spät abends ins Büro gegangen ist. Wir waren hier ja schon. Ich denke nicht, dass
Looks
wir...
pretty fresh. I wonder what the killer uses to write with. The former Percival McDonough, being a good politician. No time to waste with further conversation right now.
Das habe ich mir gedacht. Hier gibt es nichts mehr. Mal zum Lampenlager. Warum nicht?
You there! What are you doing?
I'm Miles Fordham. I'm trying to find out about...
No time for that now! Get in here and shield your eyes!
I beg your pardon?
Just do it!
What's going on exactly?
Shh! Everything ready, Alex? 3, 2, 1, go! works! It works!
What works?
Etheric lamps! Our experiment was a success!
What exactly have we wandered into here, Miles?
Das frage ich mich aber
Too
auch.
bad you didn't get a chance to read that sign before their little experiment.
May I ask you a few questions?
Of course! What would you like to know?
Selbe Brille wie unser Doc, also unser Gerichtsmediziner.
You worked with a man named Burley Cause, is that right?
Yes, I heard he was killed. Such a senseless tragedy. It's a shame he missed out on our demonstration. He was really interested in etheric technology.
Wasn't he concerned about losing his job to these technological advances?
He had no reason to. It's been made clear to all the workers that there will always be a place for us, even if our jobs are made obsolete. Unlike some other places, we take care of our own here at the Licht Depot.
How noble. But I'm pretty sure he's full of more hot air than the HMS Lenore.
Is there anything you know about Mr. Cause's personal life that might be relevant?
I know he was married, but I don't believe he had any children. Oh, and he used to talk about his love for fishing.
Could you give me his home address? Perhaps his wife will be willing to speak with me.
Yes, certainly. He lived at 820 Orchard Avenue, apartment 2A.
Thank you for the information.
Schön.
Do you know any details about Mr. Cause's murder?
Unfortunately, I don't. The police were here asking questions, but they didn't give me many details.
Do you know of anyone who might have wanted him dead?
Not at all. Burley was very friendly, always treated everyone around here with respect. You know, it's sad to think that for all our leaps forward, we're still really just a bunch of savages.
You mentioned something about etheric lamps?
Yes! Weren't you paying attention to our demonstration? You have just witnessed history!
What I witnessed was a blinding flash of light.
Exactly! That flash was the result of years of painstaking research and experimentation. It means that not only does ethericity exist, but it can be used as a source of illumination. If these experiments continue to be successful, as I suspect they will, we'll have etheric street lamps before the end of the decade. Imagine lamps that burn twice as bright, 4 times as long. Oh, this will change everything.
And if it's like anything else we've seen, it'll put a lot of people out of work, too.
Das ist so.
Are you familiar with the Justice Killer?
I've read about it in the newspaper. A horrible business. It makes me wish we could install more street lamps to keep this city safer at night. Someday, I hope to realize that dream. Then we'll really deserve to be called Lamplight City.
You think brighter streets will stop serial murderers?
It's well known that crime rates are lower in Lyon and Worcester, and they have many more street lamps per square mile.
I'm sure it has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of wealth in those areas. Has to be all about the lighting.
What is it you do here exactly?
Oh, several things. This is the main hub of the city's Department of Illumination. It's really just a grandiose way of saying that this is where all affairs related to street lamps and public lighting are taken care of. But in addition to sending out lamplighters or mechanics to repair damaged lamps, we also do research into new methods of illumination. That's what my personal specialization is. I help develop and test more efficient ways of lighting our streets. I guess you could consider me a modern-day Prometheus. Yes.
More like an everyday pretentious.
Thank you. Your cooperation is much appreciated.
Happy to help.
Immerhin wurde uns gesagt, wo eines der Opfer gewohnt hat.
Wouldn't get too close to that thing. It might end up turning you inside out. So this is where all the lamps in the city come from. I can't believe I never bothered finding out before. There's the bunch of crap they used to build street lamps with. Too bad you didn't get it.
Also er hat hier gewohnt. Ich würde sagen, Brückenbaustelle als nächstes. Bauarbeiter.
Safe for only 25 men at once. I used to draw the line at 2.
Ist doch irgendwas.
I wonder if it would be any fun to tie yourself to that thing and go for a few spins.
Da sind noch mehr Bauarbeiter.
Huh, they seem to be making pretty decent progress.
Sonst haben wir hier nichts zum Angucken. Ne. Aber gut, dann war es das erstmal für diese Folge. Ich bedanke mich recht herzlich fürs Zusehen. Lasst gerne ein Like und ein Abo da. Ihr könnt auch gerne einen Kommentar schreiben. Besucht mich auf Twitch, wenn ihr möchtet, und lasst da auch ein Follow da. Und wir sehen uns dann beim nächsten Mal. Ciao, ciao.